Berlin in winter is a city drawn in grayscale. The streets shimmered under a thin layer of sleet, the historic arts district wrapped in a chilled hush that felt less like weather and more like morning. The old buildings, with their soot-stained facades and weathered columns, stood like sentinels guarding secrets too ancient to speak. Somewhere behind one of those ivy-cloaked walls, inside a crumbling building older than the century Evelyn Voss had once painted. Now, she was gone. The news hadn't broken publicly yet. It was still a whisper, passed from trembling lips to eager ears in backroom bars and high-ceilinged studios. But the inner circle of the European art world was already humming with dread and fascination. The woman known as the Phantom of Berlin had finally lived up to her name. Julian Mercer first heard the rumor 3 hours after his plane touched down at Flughafen Berlin-Brandenburg. His assistant, Simone, called from their hotel suite the moment the cab left the airport curb. "She's missing," Simone said, not even waiting for a greeting. Evelyn's studio was found empty this morning. Police say it looks like she stepped out for a minute and never returned. Julian removed his sunglasses, letting the gray of Berlin seep into his American sensibilities. Define empty. "The lights were on," Simone said, her voice faltering. There was a cup of coffee still steaming. The canvas she was working on, the morning room, it was halfway finished. Brushes in mid-stroke. Julian swore under his breath. Someone tip off the tabloids? Not yet. But the concierge at her building's already taken bribes. If we don't move now, the story won't belong to us. He pressed his thumb and forefinger into his eyes. Send a car to the studio. I want to see it for myself. The building on Leierstrasse looked like it might collapse if one more winter tried its luck. A narrow brick husk with warped window panes and graffiti older than most of its residents. Evelyn had chosen it deliberately, Simone explained as they climbed the stairs. Privacy over prestige. Shadow over spotlight. The studio was on the 5th floor, door ajar when they arrived. Julian hesitated at the threshold. Something felt off, less like abandonment, more like interruption. Like walking into a room where someone had just left, or never really left at all. Inside, it smelled of turpentine and burning leaves. Paint tubes lay uncapped, their contents dried mid-squeeze. A floor-length window let in the thin daylight, casting milky rectangles across a jungle of easels, canvases, and old books. Evelyn's paintings leaned against the walls like silent witnesses. Each one was a punch to the chest, figures without faces, cities crumbling into mist, children melting into dreamscapes. All of it raw, visceral, and unmistakably hers. Simone moved carefully around the room, snapping photographs with her phone. "There," she whispered, pointing. In the far corner stood the last canvas Evelyn had touched. The morning room. It was larger than the others, nearly 6 feet tall, and dominated by shadow. In the foreground, a child sat on a decaying velvet couch, hands in their lap, head bowed. Behind them, an open door led into nothingness. The brushstrokes at the edges faded, as if Evelyn had run out of time, or been pulled away. Beneath the canvas, a leather-bound book lay partially hidden beneath a paint-smeared tarp. Julian bent to retrieve it. "Don't touch that," Simone said sharply. "The police missed it. We should document." But Julian was already holding it, flipping through thick, ink-stained pages. The entries were short. Some no longer than a sentence. Some in German, others in English. Many unreadable. But a few were chillingly clear. "I see her in my dreams now. She's not human anymore. They told me to stop painting her. That I'm giving her power. If anyone finds this, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to escape." At the back of the diary was a pressed Polaroid. The image was smudged, but it showed Evelyn, at least, they assumed it was her, standing in front of a mirror. Her reflection was missing. Julian sat back on his heels, throat dry. What the hell happened here? Simone looked at him, pale. I think we're inside her last painting. Across the city, the whispers spread like oil across water. In a Kreuzberg cafe, two art students argued over whether Evelyn Voss ever existed at all. In a West End gallery, a retired curator lit a cigarette with shaking fingers and muttered, "She's gone because she finished it. She finished the painting." By the time the sun slipped behind the Gothic skyline, Julian had already made a decision. The show would go on. Not as a celebration. As an investigation. He booked out the entire Kestrel Gallery in New York. 1 month. Evelyn's work, every piece that could be borrowed, bought, or salvaged, would be displayed. The morning room would hang in the center. The diary would be encased in glass. He hired a documentary crew. Not to make a film about the art. To find Evelyn. The disappearance of Evelyn Voss wasn't a tragedy. Not yet. It was a question. And in the art world, a good question was more valuable than a masterpiece. But in a flickering security feed from the studio that the police had overlooked, a figure moved behind the glass door at 3:17 a.m. the night she vanished. The motion sensor never triggered. The lights never turned off. The figure, tall, feminine, her features blurred and indistinct, walked up to the morning room, stared at it for exactly 13 seconds, then vanished into the wall. The police would later claim it was a glitch. But those who knew Evelyn's work best, those who had studied her palette, her shadows, her symbols, recognized the figure's silhouette. It was the girl from the painting. And she had finally stepped outside the frame. Julian Mercer hadn't slept in 36 hours. The press inquiries were multiplying like mold: The Guardian, Art Forum, Vanity Fair. Everyone wanted an answer to the same impossible question: where is Evelyn Voss? But the truth was simpler and far more brutal: he had no idea. Evelyn was supposed to be Julian's masterpiece. The one find that would put his name beside Gagosian and Saatchi. Now she was missing, presumed reclusive or mad, or dead, and all he had to show for it was an abandoned studio, a half-finished painting, and a diary full of delusions. He needed facts. He needed leverage. He needed Clara Weiss. She arrived exactly 2 days after Evelyn's disappearance. Clara didn't believe in wasting time, and she made that known before she'd even taken off her gloves. "Don't confuse me with a detective," she said, tossing her leather coat over the back of Julian's hotel couch. "I don't chase criminals. I chase truth. And sometimes the two aren't the same." Clara was in her early 40s, hair in a tight braid, and eyes like cracked glass, sharp and cold, but once you looked long enough, you saw the fire beneath. She had a reputation in Berlin's underworld: missing persons, stolen artifacts, and once, allegedly, an exorcism in the Black Forest. Julian handed her Evelyn's diary. "You'll want to start with that." She scanned the first few pages, frowning. "These aren't diary entries. They're symptoms." "Symptoms of what?" Clara looked up. "A mind trying to separate what it's dreaming from what it's doing." Day 1 of the investigation. Clara began with Evelyn's paper trail, what little of it there was. Her first find shattered the illusion: Evelyn Voss was a fabrication. Birth records, school enrollment, even passport details pointed to someone else: Eva Kruger, born 1987 in Leipzig. The name had been buried under bureaucratic dust and sealed court documents, but Clara's sources knew where to dig. Eva had been a child prodigy, accepted into the Dresden Academy of Fine Arts at just 16. Her early paintings were radically different: vivid, bright, and obsessively detailed, almost photorealistic. But there was always something off. Something that made you look too long. Then came the incident. A fire in the dormitories. One student missing, Mara Engel. Officially presumed dead in the blaze, though no remains were ever found. Eva was expelled under sealed tribunal conditions. Within months, she disappeared entirely. Evelyn Voss emerged exactly 9 months later, in Vienna, with a new style and a new face. A rebirth. Day 3 of the investigation. Julian sat in the gallery lobby, staring at one of Evelyn's paintings on his iPad, Throat of Glass. It showed a woman curled in a fetal position inside a broken cathedral, bleeding from the mouth, her face cracked like porcelain. He hadn't noticed it before, but now he swore the face resembled a younger version of Clara's missing classmate, Mara Engel. Clara called at that exact moment. "I need you to listen carefully," she said. "I've tracked Evelyn to 3 cities, Vienna, Prague, and Marseille. In each place, she had a different patron, or lover, or both. And in each place, someone died." Julian sat forward. "Accidents?" "Officially. But here's the twist, each of them posed for her. I found documentation, contracts, even sketches. And after each one died, Evelyn painted a piece that mirrored their death. Too precisely. She sent him a file of the images. Seraphim falling, a man plummeting from a stained glass window. The patron in Vienna had fallen from the roof of a cathedral during renovations. Drowned memory, a woman submerged in a black lake, her mouth open in a silent scream. Her ex-lover in Prague had drowned in her own bathtub. The orchard wound, a man crucified among blooming apple trees. In Marseille, the gallery owner had been found impaled on wrought iron fencing after a storm. Each painting predated the deaths by days. "Either she's predicting them," Clara said, "or she's orchestrating them." Julian felt ice creep into his spine. "Or something else is." Day 5 of the investigation. Clara visited the Dresden Academy under the guise of an art historian. One retired professor, Dr. Lothar Engel, ironically the father of the missing Mara, agreed to speak with her off-record. "I knew who you were the moment I saw your eyes," he said softly. "You've been chasing her too." Clara didn't deny it. The old man shuffled through a locked drawer, pulling out an old charcoal sketch, a girl screaming, her eyes bleeding ink. At the bottom, the signature, Eva Kruger. "She was brilliant," he said. "But her gift came at a cost." "What kind of cost?" "She painted people into her memory. Permanently. There were rumors she could capture not just their likeness, but something else. Something essential. And when she was done, they changed." "Changed how?" "Some said they lost time. Others had dreams of places that didn't exist. A few went mad." He paused. "My daughter posed for her. Once. I begged her not to. But Mara said she had to. That Eva had drawn her since before they'd even met. 2 weeks later, the fire." He leaned in, voice cracking. "I don't think she died. I think she became the painting." Day 8 of the investigation. Clara returned to Evelyn's studio. The police had cleared the scene, but Julian had bribed the building manager to keep it untouched. She walked slowly, carefully, as if stepping into a cathedral of ghosts. She stopped in front of the morning room. There was a new detail. Faint, almost imperceptible, a second figure, reflected in a shadowed mirror behind the child. A face, blurry, mouth wide as if mid-scream. It hadn't been there before. Clara stared at it long enough to hear something move behind her. A brush fell. She turned. No one there. But when she looked back at the painting, the second figure's mouth was closed. Final entry of Chapter 2. That night, Clara left Julian a voice message. Her voice was calm, but strained. "I've been going about this wrong," she said. "This isn't about disappearance. It's about transference. Evelyn isn't hiding, she's evolving. Every painting is a chrysalis. And the ones who pose for her, they're the raw material." She paused. "There's something inside the morning room, Julian. Not just symbolically, I think she found a way to seal things into the canvas. People, moments, possessions, maybe even souls. The message cut out for 6 seconds. When it resumed, her voice was a whisper. I looked at the painting again. I swear I saw my own reflection inside it. But it was older. And smiling. A final beat of static. Then nothing. The canvas held a secret. It wasn't in the brushstrokes, nor in the imagery. It was beneath the surface, literally embedded in the pigment. Anton Solt was the best forensic art conservator in Germany, maybe in all of Europe. He'd restored war-damaged frescoes in Palermo and deacidified Nazi-looted masterworks for the Berlin Museum's hidden vaults. He was not easily disturbed. But after 2 hours with Evelyn Voss's The Morning Room, he called Julian Mercer directly. "I need you to come here," he said, voice thin. "And bring someone you trust." In the temperature-controlled lab beneath the Neue National Gallery, Julian stood behind a sheet of bulletproof glass, watching Anton delicately scrape a 1mm pigment sample from the canvas's shadowy corner. "What are we looking at?" Julian asked. Anton turned from his microscope. "You told me Evelyn used oil and crushed charcoal. And she did. But this," he pointed to the reddish tone shadowing the child's chair, "this isn't a traditional red oxide or cadmium pigment. It's a hybrid compound." Julian leaned closer. "Hybrid?" Anton nodded. "It's linseed oil, yes, but the binding medium is blood. Human. Dried. Preserved. Mixed with oil to keep it wet enough to spread." Julian's stomach tightened. "Blood? From who?" "I had a forensic pathologist run DNA sequencing through Interpol," Anton said, removing his gloves. "It matched a missing persons report filed in Geneva last year." He handed Julian a file. "René Hallberg. Swiss gallerist. Age 51. Disappeared June 12, 2024, after opening Evelyn's most controversial exhibit, the Ash Waltz. Last seen leaving a private afterparty with the artist herself. Cause of disappearance, unknown. Official status, presumed dead." Now, Julian looked at the sample again, and saw it not as pigment, but as evidence. It took only one leak. One anonymous tip to an arts journalist in Vienna. Within 72 hours, every major outlet in Europe and the US had picked up the headline. The Canvas Killer? Evelyn Voss, enigmatic genius, or murderer in disguise? The subreddits exploded. YouTubers began dissecting every painting, every brushstroke. TikTok teens posted side-by-sides of missing persons and Evelyn's figures. True crime podcasts announced 10-part deep dives before even confirming her real name. Evelyn became myth. Not just an artist. A phenomenon. A cult. And still, no body. No Evelyn. Just a growing trail of portraits and corpses. On the 7th day of the investigation, Berlin police received an anonymous envelope containing a photo. It was grainy, black and white, and looked like it had been taken with a vintage camera. In it, a woman in a red dress, floating face down in a narrow canal. The image had an unnatural stillness, like a painting, not a photograph. Scrawled on the back in oil pencil were 3 words. "Check the spree." Within hours, dive teams were dispatched to the site depicted, a forgotten bend in the Spree River near Mobit, overgrown with reeds and hemmed in by rusted barge docks. They found no body. But after 3 hours of dredging, divers surfaced with something far stranger. A rectangular bundle, 5 feet long, tightly wrapped in blackened oilcloth, bound with rope and lashed to a concrete block. A painting. At the police evidence facility, conservators slowly unwrapped it. It was titled in faint white lettering at the bottom edge. "The Drowning of Truth." It showed the same woman from the photo, red dress, floating, arms spread like wings, but now her face was visible, gaunt, pale, unmistakable. It was Clara Weiss. Julian stared at the painting in stunned silence. His phone buzzed in his coat pocket, a voicemail notification from Clara. Timestamp, 3 days ago. He listened. Julian. I don't know if I'm still myself. The more I read Evelyn's diary, the more I see things. Not just reflections. Whole memories that aren't mine. She's not gone. She's changing hosts. Transferring. The paintings, they're prisons. Not for her, for us. A long breath. Then a whisper. I dreamed of drowning last night. I felt the water. The red dress. I don't even own a red dress, Julian. Click. She hadn't answered since. Interpol's Behavioral Analysis Unit opened a cold case review of every city Evelyn had worked in under aliases. The timeline was staggering. 2008, Vienna. A gallery apprentice dies by overdose after modeling for Evelyn's first communion. The pose? Reclining, mouth agape, fingers curled like claws. 2011, Krakow. A hotel concierge disappears after Evelyn's week-long stay. Later, a private collector reveals an unpublished piece titled Bellhop's Descent, a man spiraling down a staircase made of hands. 2017, Amsterdam. Evelyn hosts a living art performance. The subject, her romantic partner, is later hospitalized for catatonia. The painting, Mute Bloom, shows a flower with a screaming face in its core. Each piece, each disappearance, followed a grotesque pattern. Not symbols. Not metaphors. Portraits. Julian sat alone in the empty New York gallery, lights off, the morning room still crated in the corner. He stared at the photos of Evelyn's work, laid out across the floor like crime scene stills. He thought about Renee Hallberg's blood mixed with pigment. About Clara's voice on the tape. About the faint smile in that second figure, changing each time someone looked at it. And then he said it aloud, for the first time, to no one. Are these paintings feeding on us? 2 days after the spree dredging, police analyzed the wooden stretcher bars of the submerged painting. Microscopic traces of skin cells. Not Clara's. Evelyn's. Fresh. Whoever wrapped the drowning of truth and dropped it into the river, had done so after Evelyn's disappearance. Evelyn wasn't dead. She was still painting. And somewhere, perhaps in a canal-side room, or an abandoned church, or a dream someone hadn't woken from, she was watching. The bundle from the canal was still damp when conservators at the Bundeskriminalamt peeled back the oilcloth, hands trembling, gas masks on. At first glance, it was another haunting Evelyn original, murky canal water, limbs weightless, the red of the dress bleeding into the dark. But it was the face that stopped the room. It was not Evelyn. It was Clara Weiss. Self-Portrait in Drowning. That was the title etched at the bottom in Evelyn's unmistakable, looping script. The paint was barely dry, streaks still soft to the touch. But the signature was old, aged into the canvas like a fossil. As if it had been painted both yesterday and years ago. And the eyes, Clara's eyes, looked straight out of the canvas. Not dead. Not drowned. Alert. Julian sat across from two detectives in a soundproof room at the Berlin police headquarters, fingers twitching against a glass of untouched water. She's alive, he said. That painting proves it. Detective Rilke leaned in. Does it? Or does it prove she's not alone in this? Julian blinked. What do you mean? Rilke dropped a photo onto the table. A still frame from CCTV footage. Timestamp, 2:17 a.m. Date, the night Evelyn vanished. Location, her Berlin studio. Julian Mercer entering through the side door. Somewhere in Warsaw, holed up in a second-floor flat above a shuttered tailor shop, Clara Weiss recorded a video message and uploaded it to an encrypted channel. She looked thinner. Eyes ringed in purple, hair chopped short as if in a panic. "I don't know who to trust anymore," she whispered. "They're watching me. But it's not Evelyn. Evelyn is gone. Or, maybe she's never existed. Maybe there never was a Voss. Maybe it was always Julian." She glanced off-screen. Whispered. "He had those paintings before they were ever exhibited. I saw customs documents. Shipment logs. Originals he claimed were lost. Or, newly discovered. But they had predates on the canvases. Like she was painting things before she painted them. And the braid, he kept it like a relic. Like something sacred." Her voice dropped to a rasp. "He didn't find Evelyn. He made her." 4 days later, NYPD, working with Interpol, executed a warrant on Julian Mercer's Manhattan brownstone in Tribeca. Inside his locked basement studio, they found 27 canvases wrapped in archival plastic, never before shown publicly. 14 of them definitively authenticated as Evelyn's work. 9 marked forgeries, unfinished, but disturbingly accurate replicas. For in a style unlike anything in her known catalog, darker, more anatomical, more surgical. On one easel stood a work in progress titled Inheritance. The figure on the canvas had Evelyn's features, but Julian's hands. Pale. Spread. Holding a paintbrush, dripping with blood. In the corner of the room, sealed in an antique glass specimen jar, floated a braid of blonde hair. Next to it, tucked inside a false drawer, Evelyn's German passport. Blood-stained brushes. A VHS tape labeled Voss/Test Number 3, Containment Breach. What began as a mysterious disappearance was now a cultural war. On one side, the truthers, the fans, the would-be cultists. Evelyn Voss never existed. She was a brand, a ghost Julian invented to sell paintings. The art world needed a virgin myth. He built her from whispers. On the other side, the believers. Julian Mercer found something real. He tried to own it. And it destroyed him. She's not gone. She's just somewhere else now. Painting from behind the glass. Clara stopped appearing online. But sometimes, comments appeared under articles, written in her cadence. One of them simply read, "If you see yourself in her paintings, run." The paintings in Julian's home revealed something more disturbing than forgery. Under infrared spectroscopy, multiple canvases contained residual skin cells, traceable to 4 missing individuals. A resin compound used in embalming. Fingerprints embedded in the underpainting, not Julian's. Pigment containing trace DNA from Clara Weiss. But Clara had not been in New York. She hadn't left Europe. So how did her DNA end up in a painting Julian was making? Unless... In police custody, Julian finally broke his silence. "I didn't kill Evelyn," he said. "I tried to protect her. From herself. From what she was becoming." Detectives asked what that meant. Julian gestured to one of the recovered paintings, Inheritance. "She could see people," he said. "I don't mean artistically, I mean completely. She said she could paint them into endings. And once it was finished, it was like something crossed over. A person she painted would either disappear, or become different. Distant. Lost." He swallowed. "I thought she was mentally ill. But then it started happening to me." He held up his hands. "They're not mine anymore. I don't know whose they are. But they want to paint." Interpol experts managed to convert the contents of the VHS tape. It showed a dim, locked room. Evelyn Voss, seated before a canvas. Gaunt. Eyes wide and lucid, but not sane. Behind a two-way mirror, Julian's voice narrated clinical observations. Subject appears calm. Phase 3, second session. Medium, oil, synthetic blood binder. Goal, extract residual trauma and observe transference reaction. Evelyn looked straight into the mirror. She smiled. "You think I'm the subject?" she said. "You poor boy. You're inside it now." The camera shook. Static. The sound of glass breaking. Then, black. Interpol confirmed that several of the paintings in Julian's home had never been seen in public, and had dates matching missing persons reports from multiple countries. But when those families were shown the portraits, the reactions were mixed. Some wept. Some screamed. One elderly woman collapsed, whispering, "That's my daughter's breath. I can hear it in the eyes." And one man said, "That's me. But I'm not dead. I'm still here. But that smile, that's not mine." He was found just after 4 a.m., during routine bed checks. Julian Mercer's cell door was locked from the inside. No signs of forced entry, no tampering with the surveillance feed. The guards swore the cameras had been operational all night, until they weren't. For exactly 17 minutes and 44 seconds, the footage cut to static. When it returned, Julian was dead. His throat had been precisely slit, not jagged, not desperate. Executed with an improvised blade, a toothbrush filed down, its handle sharpened to mimic the edge of a palette knife. On the wall of his cell, painted in blood and capital letters, "She is watching." The body was cold. But the paint on the wall was still drying. With Mercer dead, the case began to collapse under its own mythos. Clara Weiss remained missing. Evelyn Voss remained a ghost. And despite public obsession, no new evidence emerged. Interpol quietly declassified the case files 6 months later, citing inconclusive forensic inconsistencies. But the questions didn't die. If Julian hadn't forged the paintings, if Evelyn hadn't died, if someone, or something, was still creating these works, then what was the source? Exactly 1 year later, on the eve of the Biennale, a private gallery along the Rio de San Stin quietly opened its doors under the title Memento, The Lost Works of Evelyn Voss. No press release. No catalog. No social media. Just a handwritten sign on the door. And a line of people that snaked around the canal by morning. Inside, candles lit the narrow corridor, casting flickering light onto 23 paintings. All new. All unmistakably hers. At the heart of the gallery hung the most stripped-down painting Evelyn had ever, allegedly, produced. A matte black canvas. Nothing else. Until viewed under ultraviolet light. Then, a white candle emerged, tall, elegant, unlit, and behind it, the faint silhouette of a woman. Older. Paler. Eyes closed. Evelyn. Or, someone wearing her face. The caption beside the frame read only, "Stillness before flame." The exhibition lasted 3 days. Then the gallery owner, Anselmo Ferretti, a Milanese art dealer with no known connection to Voss, vanished. CCTV footage showed him leaving through the side exit with a long, flat crate. He was never seen again. That same week, across Venice, a Biennale curator fell from her hotel balcony. A visiting academic, who had written a paper on Voss's aesthetic necromancy, disappeared during a gondola tour. A sketch artist posted a charcoal rendering of Evelyn's last known self-portrait. When questioned, he claimed he hadn't drawn it. He woke up with it beside him. Every city that Memento toured, Prague, Kyoto, Montreal, and eventually Los Angeles, reported a single disappearance connected to the Evelyn Voss case. Always someone with a stake in the truth. Always someone who had seen too much. Always one less whisper to chase. At a midnight screening in Berlin, a viral video surfaced from a visitor to the final Memento exhibit. It showed the black canvas. Under UV, the candle flickered, not metaphorically, it flickered. Then, as the phone zoomed in, the silhouette behind it opened her eyes. And smiled. Seconds later, the footage corrupted. The phone was later found smashed in a fountain. The user, account deleted. Identity unknown. But those who saw the clip agreed on one thing. The painting was watching back. Experts debated whether Evelyn Voss had faked her death, or whether she ever existed as one person at all. Some called her a multi-artist persona, a decentralized myth. Others believed she had discovered a medium, a metaphysical tool, that allowed her to paint consciousness itself. Not haunted paintings, one theorist wrote, but paintings that haunt. Because even now, years after the first disappearance, new works continue to surface. In antique stores. In galleries that claim no knowledge of their origin. In private collections that swear they never bought them. Each time, a new portrait. A new subject. A new loss. In a handwritten letter sent anonymously to Le Monde's art editor, a single paragraph, attributed only to KW, was published with no context. It read, "She was never the painter. She was the brush. The world made her, then wielded her. Every wound became an image. Every image became a mirror. And now, you're in the frame too. One thing's for certain. Evelyn Voss, or whatever she became, is not done. Her art still speaks. And now, it knows your name."